Hi, I'm Kylie. I write romance where love meets danger. This story starts with a single text and ends in a gilded cage. If you love it, comment and we'll make the audiobook for Spotify. Subscribe for more. Let's begin. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and overbrewed coffee, the kind that had been sitting on a warming plate since dawn. And the hum of the fluorescent lights above my head made everything feel slightly unreal, as if I were standing inside a dream I hadn't agreed to have. I sat on the edge of the narrow exam table, the paper sheet crinkling beneath me every time I shifted my weight. My hands folded tightly in my lap as I stared at the grainy black and white image the technician had just printed. She had spoken calmly, professionally, the way people do when they deliver news that shatters someone else's sense of reality, but is routine to them. 8 weeks along, everything looks normal. Congratulations. The word congratulations echoed in my head as if it belonged to someone else, someone whose life wasn't already hanging together by a thread. I nodded, murmured a thank you, and gathered my things on autopilot, slipping the ultrasound image into my purse as if it were something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Outside, the Los Angeles sun was blinding, the kind of relentless brightness that made it impossible to hide from your thoughts. Cars rushed past on Wilshire Boulevard. People moved with purpose, and the city carried on as if nothing monumental had just happened inside my body. I leaned against the building for a moment, my breath shallow, my palm pressing instinctively against my stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. No curve, no movement, just the knowledge that everything had changed. 2 weeks. That was how long it had been since Evan disappeared. 2 weeks since his last text telling me he was running late. 2 weeks since I'd fallen asleep on my couch with the TV on and woken up alone. 2 weeks of unanswered calls and a silence that felt heavier with every passing day. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that people didn't just vanish without a reason, but the fear had already taken root. I drove back to my apartment in Koreatown, the radio playing softly as if it were trying to comfort me, and when I walked inside, the familiar space felt smaller than it ever had before. My job as a freelance interior decorator barely covered rent when things were stable. With a baby on the way and no sign of the man who was supposed to be my partner, the numbers didn't add up in any universe. I sat on my couch, purse still slung over my shoulder, and stared at the ultrasound again. I needed to tell someone. Not my parents in Arizona, who already thought Los Angeles had ruined me. Not my clients, who saw me as a professional solution to their aesthetic problems. Not a woman on the brink of panic. My best friend Maya was the obvious choice. She lived in Seattle now, always busy but always there when it mattered. My fingers trembled slightly as I took a photo of the ultrasound and opened our message thread, typing a short caption about needing advice, about something important. I didn't notice that the contact name at the top wasn't Maya until after I hit send. The reply came almost immediately, a vibration against my palm that made my stomach drop before I even read the words. Is this meant for me? The number wasn't saved in my phone, just a string of digits with a California area code. And for a second, I thought it might be a scam or some kind of glitch. My heart started pounding as I opened the message thread and saw the image I had just sent sitting there, exposed and intimate in a place it didn't belong. I typed back quickly, apologizing, explaining it was a mistake, asking them to please ignore it. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was embarrassing but harmless, that strangers text the wrong numbers all the time. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, then appeared again, stretching my nerves thin. Who is this? The reply finally came. I hesitated. Something about the bluntness of the question made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to escalate the situation by being rude. I replied that it was just a mix-up, that I hadn't meant to involve them, that I was sorry for bothering them. The response came back slower this time. You sent this to Evan's number. My chest tightened. That didn't make sense. Evan's number was saved in my phone, the same one I had been texting and calling for the past 2 weeks, unless he had changed it, unless the messages I'd been sending into the void had never reached him at all. My fingers hovered over the screen as a cold realization began to form. How do you know Evan? I typed, my throat dry. The answer was immediate and unsettlingly calm. We worked together. He owes me something. A chill ran through me. Evan worked in logistics, or so he had said. He traveled a lot, handled contracts, talked about warehouses and shipping routes in a way that sounded legitimate enough that I'd never questioned it. The expensive dinners, the sudden trips, the cash he always seemed to have on hand. I had accepted it all without digging too deep. Now, sitting alone in my apartment with an ultrasound in my purse and a stranger on the other end of my phone who knew too much, every overlooked detail came rushing back. I told him I didn't know where Evan was, that he'd been gone for 2 weeks, that I hadn't heard from him. The reply took longer, long enough that I considered blocking the number and pretending this conversation had never happened. When it finally came, it was a single sentence that made my blood run cold. "And you're carrying his child." I stared at the words, my vision blurring, my breath coming fast and shallow. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it. I told him not to contact me again. I told him I would go to the police if he kept messaging me. I reached for the block button, desperate to end it, but before I could press it, another message appeared. This one listing my address, my neighborhood, the coffee shop I stopped at every morning. Details that no stranger should have known. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the coffee table. Someone had been watching me. I sank onto the floor, my back against the couch, my mind racing. When I picked up the phone again, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. "What do you want from me?" The response was swift. "We need to talk. In person." The knock on my door came just after sunset. 3 sharp raps that echoed through my apartment and froze me in place. I hadn't called the police. I hadn't packed a bag. I hadn't even eaten. I stood in the narrow hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure whoever was on the other side could hear it. When I finally forced myself to speak, my voice sounded small and brittle. "Who is it?" A man answered, his tone polite, almost apologetic. He used my name as if we were acquainted. He said he was there on behalf of his employer and that I needed to come with him. I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around for something to defend myself with, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. I lied and said I had called the police. There was a pause, then a soft laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. He told me I hadn't, that they would have known. He told me I could come willingly or be escorted, that his employer preferred cooperation. I knew then that my choices were already limited. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, my purse, and opened the door. 2 men stood in the hallway, both dressed neatly, their expressions neutral, their presence overwhelming. They led me downstairs to a black SUV idling at the curb, the windows dark and impenetrable. As we drove through the city, I tried to memorize every turn, every street, but it quickly became impossible. Eventually, the noise of traffic faded, replaced by the steady rush of the ocean. And when the car finally stopped, I found myself staring at a sprawling estate perched above the cliffs of Malibu. Inside, everything was quiet and controlled, the air cool and scented faintly with citrus. I was led into a study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, and after a few minutes, a man entered who commanded the room without raising his voice. He introduced himself as Marcus Hale. He explained, calmly and precisely, that Evan had taken something that didn't belong to him, that it involved a great deal of money and information, and that several dangerous people were now looking for him. He told me that because of my connection to Evan and the child I was carrying, I was now part of the situation whether I wanted to be or not. He said he believed I didn't know what Evan had done. He said that for now I would stay here, under his protection. I asked what would happen to Evan. Marcus's expression didn't change as he replied that that depended on Evan. That night, alone in a guest room larger than any space I had ever lived in, I lay awake listening to the distant crash of waves and wondered how my life had veered so far off course in a single day. The days that followed blurred together, a strange mix of luxury and fear. I was treated politely, almost kindly, given beautiful clothes and gourmet meals, allowed to walk the grounds during the day under discreet supervision, but I wasn't allowed to leave. I wasn't allowed to contact anyone from my old life. Every comfort felt like a reminder of my lack of freedom. Marcus spoke to me often, explaining pieces of Evan's double life, the network he'd been involved in, the people he had betrayed. He never raised his voice, He never threatened me outright. Instead, he framed everything as necessity, as logic, as the natural consequences of Evan's choices. I listened because listening was safer than arguing, because I needed information as much as he did. When he told me Evan had tried to make contact again, that he wanted to meet, my emotions twisted into something painful and complicated. Part of me wanted answers. Part of me wanted to scream at him for disappearing, for lying, for putting me in danger. Marcus suggested a controlled meeting in a public place, somewhere Evan would feel safe. He said I would be protected, that his people would be nearby. I agreed, knowing that refusal wouldn't change much. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a dress Marcus's staff had chosen for me, my reflection looking calmer than I felt. I touched my stomach, a silent promise forming in my chest. Whatever happened, I would protect my child. The cafe in Santa Monica was busy enough to provide cover, the hum of conversation and clink of dishes, creating a sense of normalcy that felt surreal. I sat at a small table near the window, a cup of tea cooling in front of me, my eyes flicking toward the door every time it opened. When Evan finally walked in, he looked different, thinner, tired. His confidence replaced by something sharp and desperate. When he saw me, relief washed over his face, followed quickly by fear. He sat across from me and reached for my hands, but I pulled back. I told him I was pregnant. I watched his reaction closely as his eyes widened, his breath catching. He swore he hadn't known. He said he left to protect me. He said Marcus was dangerous, that I needed to get away. I listened, my heart aching despite myself, until the cracks in his story became impossible to ignore. When he suggested we run, that he had a car waiting, that we could disappear together, something inside me went cold. I realized he was still lying, still manipulating, still willing to gamble with my life and our child's future. When I said the code word Marcus had given me, the shift was immediate. The cafe erupted into chaos as Marcus's people moved in, blocking exits, disarming threats I hadn't even noticed. Evan tried to use me as a shield, his desperation turning ugly, but it ended quickly. I was pulled away, shaken but unharmed, as Evan was restrained. His eyes met mine one last time, pleading, but whatever I had felt for him dissolved in that moment. The ride back to the estate was quiet. Marcus sat beside me, his presence steady, asking if I was hurt, if I needed anything. I told him I was fine, though my hands still trembled. I asked what would happen to Evan. Marcus said Evan would answer for what he'd done, that the information he had taken would be recovered, that the threats against me would be neutralized. I didn't ask for details. Some things were better left unspoken. That night, as I lay in bed staring out at the dark ocean, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The man I thought I loved was gone, replaced by the reality of who he had always been. In the days that followed, Marcus gave me options. I could return to my old life with financial support and protection, or I could stay, at least for a while, until things settled. The choice felt heavier than I had expected. Los Angeles no longer felt safe in the way it once had. The estate, for all its implications, offered security I couldn't deny. I spent long hours walking the grounds, thinking about the future, about what kind of world I wanted to bring my child into. Marcus never pressured me, but I could feel the calculation behind his patience. When we talked, he spoke about responsibility, about loyalty, about the mistakes people made when they underestimated the consequences of their actions. He spoke about his own family, about losses he didn't dwell on, but clearly carried. Slowly, my fear of him softened into something more complex. I never forgot how I'd arrived here, but I also couldn't deny the reality of the protection he offered. The line between captor and protector blurred until it became a single, continuous thread, and I found myself relying on his presence, not with gratitude, but with a weary acceptance. He began to share more about his operations, not the illegal ones, but the legitimate businesses that form the public face of his empire: real estate, venture capital, art acquisition. He spoke of them with the same detached precision he used for everything else, but I could see the pride there, the satisfaction of building something that would last. He asked for my opinion once. on the renovation plans for a downtown property. It was a test, I knew, a way to see if my professional skills had any value in his world. I gave my thoughts honestly, pointing out flaws in the flow, suggesting materials that would age better. He listened, nodded, and a week later I saw the revised plans incorporating my suggestions. It was a small thing, insignificant in the grand scheme, but it was the first time since arriving that I felt like something other than a problem to be managed. It was also the first time I saw a crack in his complete control. He had deferred to my expertise. However minor the subject, he had acknowledged a boundary where my knowledge exceeded his. I tucked that realization away, a tiny shard of power to hold on to. The pregnancy progressed. Morning sickness came in relentless waves, and the staff adjusted seamlessly, bringing ginger tea and plain crackers before I even had to ask. Marcus would sometimes appear in the doorway of the sunroom where I spent my worst mornings, never entering, just observing with that assessing gaze. He never offered comfort in words, but his instructions to the staff were always swift and precise, ensuring my comfort was prioritized. It was protection as a form of asset management, I told myself. Keeping the mother healthy kept the child healthy. Keeping me stable prevented complications. But there were moments, fleeting and easily dismissed, that felt like something else. The time he quietly had a particular brand of herbal tea I'd mentioned in passing, sourced and stocked in the kitchen. The way he'd subtly shift his schedule to be present during my evening walks along the cliff path, a silent, watchful shadow against the deepening sky. I told myself it was just more surveillance, more control. But the control was beginning to feel like a net, not a cage, something that could catch me if I fell, not just something that held me down. Weeks passed. My body began to change in small, undeniable ways. The immediate danger faded, replaced by a cautious calm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, Marcus asked me what I had decided. I told him I needed time, that I wasn't ready to commit to any version of the future yet. He accepted that, his nod respectful. He said my safety and my child's safety were his priority, regardless of my decision. The formality of it was a shield for both of us. Later that night, unable to sleep, I wandered down to the library. He was there, as I half expected him to be, standing by the windows with a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring out at the moonlit ocean. He didn't turn when I entered, but his posture shifted, a subtle acknowledgement of my presence. I moved to the shelves, trailing my fingers over the leather-bound spines, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. It was he who broke it. He contacted you again. It wasn't a question. I froze, my hand on a book about coastal architecture. Of course he knew. He knew everything that happened under this roof, on these grounds, probably in the whole city if he wanted to. Evan had sent an email to an old, unused account of mine, a plea, a promise, a desperate, rambling attempt to explain that he never meant for any of this to happen, that he loved me, that he wanted his child. I hadn't replied. I hadn't even fully read it before deleting it, the words like poison on the screen. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice quiet in the vast room. He doesn't get a voice in this anymore. Marcus finally turned. The moonlight cut across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the shadowed hollows of his eyes. It matters if it disturbs you. Everything disturbs me, I replied, a brittle honesty I usually kept locked away. The silence disturbs me. The comfort disturbs me. His voice, your voice, my own thoughts. It's all just different levels of noise in a room I didn't choose to enter. He was silent for a long moment, studying me. Then he set his glass down on a side table with a soft click. You think you had no choice? Did I? You had a choice between greater and lesser dangers. You chose the one that offered a chance of survival. That is always a choice. It is often the only real one we have. His words were like cold water, shocking in their clarity. He was right. I had chosen the SUV over whatever waited in my apartment. I had chosen to listen, to cooperate, to play my part in the cafe. Every step had been a choice made in the narrow space between terrors. Recognizing that didn't make me feel empowered. It made me feel tired and old and strangely calm. "What happens when the danger is gone?" I asked, turning to face him fully. "When there's no greater or lesser threat to measure, what choice is left then?" He took a step closer, not invading my space, but closing the distance enough that I could see the flecks of gray in his dark irises. "Then you choose what to build from the rubble," he said, his voice low. "Most people never get that chance. They spend their lives running from one threat to the next, never stopping to look at the materials they've gathered along the way." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to my midsection before meeting my eyes again. "You have more materials than most. You have clarity, you have survived, and you have a reason to build something that lasts." He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and left the library, leaving me alone with the echo of his words and the thunderous roar of the ocean below. I stood there for a long time, my hand once again resting on the swell of my stomach. Materials. The ultrasound was a material. The fear was a material. The bitter knowledge of Evan's betrayal was a material. The unsettling, complex safety of Marcus Hale's world was a material. I had gathered them all, unwillingly, painfully. The question was no longer about escaping the construction site. It was about deciding what to build. A routine formed in the absence of imminent crisis. Mornings were for slow walks, afternoons for reading or sketching design ideas that felt more like exercises in remembering who I used to be than plans for a future. Evenings were often spent in Marcus's company, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in a silence that had morphed from tense to contemplative. We discussed business, art, the logistical challenges of his legitimate ventures. I offered perspectives from outside his insulated world of power and consequence. He listened with a focus that was both flattering and unnerving. He was collecting data, I knew, assessing my usefulness, my loyalty, my stability. I was doing the same to him, measuring his reactions, learning the patterns of his control, identifying the few, narrow channels where influence might flow back the other way. It was a slow, careful dance, and we were both leading and following at the same time. One afternoon, he surprised me. He took me, with a full security detail, into downtown Los Angeles. Not for a meeting, but to a private viewing at a gallery specializing in modern Italian art. He didn't ask if I wanted to go. He presented it as a fact. "You need a change of scenery," was all he said. The gallery was empty except for us, the staff, and the ubiquitous security. We moved through the white rooms, past bold canvases and severe sculptures. He didn't lecture or explain. He just observed, occasionally pausing before a piece, his expression unreadable. I found myself drawn to a painting not for its technique, but for its feeling. A chaotic swirl of dark blues and grays with a single, stubborn streak of gold cutting through the center, fragile but unbroken. I stopped in front of it, losing track of time. When I finally turned, I found Marcus standing a few feet back, watching me, not the painting. "You see it," he stated, "the pivot point." I looked back at the slash of gold. "It's just a color. It's the axis the entire composition turns on. Without it, the chaos is meaningless. It's just noise. With it, it has tension, purpose." He came to stand beside me, close enough that I could smell the clean, sharp scent of his soap. "That's what you are in this situation, Clara. The pivot point." The use of my name, my real name, spoken so deliberately in this quiet place, sent a shiver through me. I don't feel pivotal. I feel incidental. Evan's betrayal was the chaos. My response was the structure around it. But you, he gestured slightly toward the painting, you are the element that gives it meaning, the human consequence, the reason the balance must be held. It was the most personal thing he had ever said to me, and it was framed in the cold language of art critique and strategy. It laid bare the truth of my value to him. I was not a person to be saved. I was a necessary component in the restoration of order. The gold slash in the painting was beautiful, but it was also trapped, forever holding the darkness at bay. I didn't know whether to feel seen or cornered. "And when the painting is finished?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "When the balance is held?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained on the canvas, his profile stark in the gallery light. "Then the gold remains," he said finally. It becomes part of the story, the most important part. We left the gallery soon after. In the car, the silence returned, but it was charged with the ghost of that conversation. He had given me a role, a definition within his narrative. The pivot point, the human consequence, the gold, they were just words, but in his world, words were contracts. I had to decide if I would sign. The decision didn't come in a dramatic moment of clarity. It seeped into me over the following days, as tangible as the baby's increasingly strong kicks. It came while I was selecting paint samples for the nursery wing he had quietly designated in the estate. It came while reviewing security protocols for a hypothetical future home that was always discussed but never located. It came as I watched him handle a crisis with one of his shipping companies, his voice calm and lethal on the phone, and then, minutes later, asked the chef if the dinner ingredients were organic for my benefit. The two sides of him were inseparable, the danger and the order, the threat and the protection. I could no more extract one from the other than I could extract the memory of Evan's lies from the reality of my pregnancy. One evening, he laid it out with finality. The last loose end from Evan's dealings had been tied off. The men who had been looking for him, for the information, for me, were no longer a factor. The legal proceedings against Evan would ensure he was gone for decades. The external threat was over. He presented me with a file. Inside were documents for a new identity, if I wanted it. A substantial bank account, deeds to a safe, discreet property in Northern California, a complete, clean exit from his world. All I had to do was take it and walk away. He also presented another file. This one contained partnership outlines, a legitimate design firm, fully funded, with my name on the door, a seat on the board of one of his charitable foundations, a continued security detail, scaled down but permanent, and a place, not as a guest or a prisoner, but as a resident, a stakeholder. In his world and in the estate, he called it a strategic alliance, mutual protection, a sensible arrangement for raising a child in a volatile environment. He did not call it anything else. He sat behind his desk, hands steepled, waiting. The ocean roared its endless rhythm against the cliffs below. I looked from one file to the other. One was freedom, laced with the terrifying quiet of being truly alone with a newborn, with only money as a buffer against a world that had already shown me its teeth. The other was power, laced with the perpetual tension of his presence, the unspoken rules, the lifetime entanglement with a man whose moral boundaries were lines drawn in shifting sand. I thought of the painting, the gold slash holding its ground, giving the chaos meaning. I was not gold. I was flesh and blood and fear and a ferocious, growing love for the child turning inside me. But I could be a pivot point. I could be the human consequence that chose its own shape. I closed the file for the clean exit. I slid it back across the desk. I didn't open the second one. I looked at Marcus Hale, at the calculating patience in his eyes, at the power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "I'm not signing a contract," I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. "I'm not becoming your partner or your stakeholder, not in those terms." His expression didn't change, but I saw the slight tightening of his jaw, a minute tell. "Then what are you doing?" "I'm staying," I said, "for now, in the house by the garden, the one with the security I pay for. I'm raising my child. I'm building my firm. And you," I took a deep breath, my hands settling on my stomach, "you can be the perimeter, the context, the structure that holds the chaos at bay. But you don't get to be the frame around my life. That's mine to draw." The silence that followed was absolute. I could see the calculations flying behind his eyes, the reassessment, the slight grudging respect as he understood my counteroffer. I was not rejecting his protection. I was renegotiating its terms. I was claiming the right to be the gold and the artist. A slow, genuine smile touched his lips, the first real one I had ever seen. It transformed his face, making him look younger, almost human. It was more terrifying than any glare. "All right, Clara," he said softly. "We'll do it your way." It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't an ending at all. It was a ceasefire. a complex, fragile arrangement built on mutual need and stark understanding. The mistake of the text had thrown me into the heart of a storm. I hadn't found my way out. Instead, I learned to read the wind, to chart a course through the tumult. I had lost a love that was never real and found a strength I never knew I had. And I had forged an alliance with the storm itself. As I left his study, the ultrasound image felt like a distant memory, a faded map to a country I had already left behind. The future was not a safe harbor. It was an open sea, vast and unpredictable. But my hands were on the wheel now, and for the first time, I knew I could steer.